permission to come aboard.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
And here we go.
Live from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, welcome to the 111th edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast, the official podcast of theepicreview.com, and I, of course, am your host, the real Brad Bell. And I will just tell you that no matter how good or bad this podcast turns out, it is not the fault of Mephisto, which gives away our main topic for this show, what everyone on the internet is talking about, that being WandaVision and a review post-finale. I don't know if we're going to go in depth in every episode of probably the most talked about show of 2021. I think that will remain true to the end of this year. But without further ado, let's get into the first of our topics, which is the critically acclaimed, general audience loved WandaVision.
This is chaos magic, Wanda. That makes you the Scarlet Witch. This is our home.
Then let's fight for it.
That was a brief trailer from the series finale of WandaVision, which took the internet by storm, and every podcast who covers these geeky topics by storm. It is the most buzzed about thing, it seems like, since the election ended, believe it or not, but definitely not going there on this podcast. I just want to say, if you cannot tell by the trailer, there is going to be spoilers for WandaVision. I would say the first season, but apparently that episode titled The Series Finale indicates, at least from Disney Plus is in and Disney's in, that we won't get a WandaVision Season 2. There could be another Disney Plus show featuring the Vision, featuring Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, but it will not be called WandaVision. So, if you have not watched this show, I highly recommend it, despite some of the complaints I'm going to have. Check out now. I'm going to roll the spoiler reel forward and skip ahead and join us when we get into our other topics for this episode. So you have been warned if you're not one of the two people who have not checked out WandaVision on Disney Plus. Spoilers from here on out. So I'm going to try to mix in good with the bad. I want you to understand that a lot of my complaints come not as a general audience member, not as a critic either, which I think there's a big difference between how critics felt about this show, especially initially and at the end, how general audiences felt about this show all the way throughout, and how fanboys like myself, I'm not going to shy away from that moniker, felt about this show. At least at the end, when we got a lot of the reveals or lack thereof. Now, fanboy is something that can be used as a detriment. Same thing for fangirl, okay? Not excluding any gender from being a fan of these comics. However, I think this show, in many ways, really pushed fanboy explainer culture to a new level. My wife has a coworker who's a casual Marvel fan, and she said that her and her husband were scouring the internet to find spoilers and potential fan theories, mainly on Reddit, YouTube, usual places you would look. And she said, I'm not going to name her, but she said, these fanboys know everything. They really have some interesting takes on this. And Abby, my wife, the mother of Beagles, the mother of Harper and Harrison now, says, I'm married to one of these fanboys, so I had to hear this stuff. And if you're listening to this podcast, you don't have to hear this, but you chose to, at least if you made it to this point. So here we go. First of all, this did not revolutionize TV storytelling or storytelling about the medium of television. What WandaVision did, as far as the setup of especially the first couple episodes being trapped in a sitcom, most people in this, aside from Wanda and maybe Agatha Harkness, played by Catherine Hahn, the great Catherine Hahn, did not know what was going on, did not know there were viewers, in this case, SWORD, the agency of SWORD, led by director Hayward, who was a complete jerk, but more on him later, watching them. This is something that I believe it was 99, maybe 98, one of Jim Carrey's last great comedic performances. Now, he's had a lot of great performances since. I think Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind's Jim Carrey's best movie. But even though there's a lot of drama in Truman Show, I definitely think it lends itself to comedy. Truman Show does the same thing. Guy trapped in a television show. Now, in this case, it seems like there's a lot of people around him who may know it's going on. Whereas in WandaVision, I'm not going to try to spoil Truman Show, by the way, here. Whereas in WandaVision, it seems like the people know they need to please Wanda. They don't necessarily know what's going on. And somehow in her subconscious, she does. That she has altered reality in Westview, New Jersey to give herself a chance to be with the love of her life, Vision, who she saw not die just once, but twice. And she was robbed of the opportunity to kill Thanos, albeit from a different time period, that man who killed her husband at the end of Avengers Endgame with the rain everything. Despite Corvus Glaive's, despite Corvus Glaive warning him, maybe we shouldn't do this. Anyway, enough has been said about Avengers Endgame on the internet. So I think what this setup did, very Truman Show-esque, is it got critics, and that's not me, despite what I may have said in the past, it got critics excited for this to be something more. This will transcend the typical MCU storytelling, especially the first 3 episodes. And I think it let critics down because it kind of devolved from high concept sci-fi to, at least in the finale, devolving into this typical superhero beam blast field, beams from the sky, lasers coming out of people's hands, bam, biff, pow, climax. And on top of that, it fell into the worst of MCU tropes of the hero fighting a evil version of someone with a very similar power set. Think of the Ironmonger and Iron Man, or the Incredible Hulk and Abomination. But Agatha Harkness was such a compelling villain, mainly powered by Catherine Hahn's performance throughout this show. Even when she was nosy neighbor up until when she was full-blown dark hole possessing Agatha Harkness, that didn't matter. That really, from a fan perspective, is not where the show went wrong for me. I think the next to last episode, so I guess it would have been episode 8 and 9, maybe it was 7 of 8, the next to last episode in which we get Agatha's origin, and we also briefly after that get Agatha taking the Scarlet Witch, or Wanda at that point, through her origin, was not just the height of this show, but top 5 MCU television. And I think retroactively, this is something the MCU does best. Think of Avengers Endgame with Thor the Dark World. It retroactively made Avengers Age of Ultron, which I think is a good movie. A lot of people kind of hate on a better movie with the scene with the Stark missile. Finally getting to see that, hearing about it, and seeing the kids experience it are two different things. But if you were a critic and this devolved into a punch 'em up with laser beams, I see why you're disappointed. As a fan, that was fine with me. When it comes to hardcore Marvel Comics fans, I think this show is guilty of extreme trolling, both from a story perspective and from a actor perspective during various interviews. Now, these actors like Paul Bettany and Teyonah Parris, who played Monica Rambeau, look, they're doing these interviews. I'm sure they sign NDAs. They're going to say stuff. That always happens in the interview circuit. And maybe it's fans' fault for reading too much into that. But when you sit up dominoes or red herrings in the context of the show and the plot, just to throw people off, and you do one time, whatever. But when you do that 2, 3, 4 times, it's like, come on, Kevin Feige. Come on, Marvel. And I will get into what I'm talking about as we move through this review. But let's kind of mix it up from the story faults of teasing these things and the actor faults. Again, the actor, say what you want to in interviews, that's fine. It kind of stinks, but I'm not going to get upset about it. Okay, the aerospace engineer. For 3 episodes, it appeared that this aerospace engineer that Monica Rambeau was teasing was somebody important. Now, a lot of people ran with it being Reed Richards, and there were rumors of John Krasinski meeting with Kevin Feige. So, that seemed to make sense to me. But I'm not that naive. I feel like that big of a character, that big of an actor, even Marvel would not have been able to keep that secret. But, hey, Mandalorian did it with, here's a spoiler for Mandalorian Season 2. Skip ahead 10 seconds if you don't want to hear it. Mando Season 2 did that with Luke Skywalker. So, I mean, it could be done. A lot of us thought it could be somebody like the Blue Marvel, who is an astrophysicist who plays a bigger role, African-American character, in the Ultimate version, or 1616, of the Marvel Comics. So you hype that up, you hype that up, you hype that up. We finally get to the point where Teyonah Parris' character, Monica Rambeau, is meeting the aerospace engineer, and it is a no-name military person. They had a name, but as far as a known character. And I think what makes it kind of worse here is to get into the hex. I love how they did call it the hex magic and chaos magic and all that stuff. Freaking awesome. But to get into the hex, which is the reality altering powers of Wanda Maximoff, there was this impressive looking vehicle that looked very like the Mars rover mixed with the Batmobile from Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. I mean, it was badass. I'm like, could this be the first incarnation of the Fantastic Car? Probably not, but possibility. And I keep looking in the background of this little tent that they're revealing this thing in, and about to have Monica, in a very cool moment, by the way, go into the hex. And I don't see anything. And I wait, and I wait, and I wait. And it is just the no-name military personnel who is the aerospace engineer. At least that's how the story portrays it as of now. Now, could Fantastic Four come out in 2024 and we find out that Reed Richards designed that and sent that to that military personnel? Sure. But look, mention an aerospace engineer one time. Mention I have a guy one time. It was not a guy, it was a female, which is fine. People say, hey guys, come on. And they're talking about males and females. But to say, I have a guy who would love to crack this, my guy will be on this, not once, not twice, but 3 times in 3 different episodes, and to give nothing, shame on you, Marvel. That was trolling by Kevin Feige. Trolling, but whatever. Let's let that one go. Sticking with Teyonah Parris, hyping up the aerospace engineer. She, in interviews, said that Marvel fans, so I'm assuming she could just be meaning MCU fans. She could be meaning people like me, who have read these comics most of their life. That's what I was assuming, but hey, that may have been a selfish point of view. Marvel fans are going to lose it when they find out who this aerospace engineer is. Oh, we did. And we lost it in the worst of ways. Now, I take this one of two ways. This could have meant that she was referring to, maybe she was confused, and she was referring to the Skrulls she meets in the post-credit scene. Maybe fans will lose it with the reveal of the Skrulls. Could that be leading a secret invasion? Whatever. Maybe that's it. I hope so. But if she was just saying that to create false hopes in the hearts of Marvel Comics fans, that's pretty messed up. Look, it's not altering my life. I'm not going to cry about it. I'm not going to quit watching the MCU over it. But it's pretty messed up. The guiltiest offender of this is the teasing of the X-Men. Now, there was always the speculation of, oh, this could be Marvel's House of M. I believe the House of M issue 1, or maybe the trade, which is long out of print, was included in a press packet when they were doing the press for the first or second episode of WandaVision. So that lends itself to, there's maybe something with mutants. Well, at the end of House of M, Wanda says no more mutants. It's a big crossover event from 2006 that really got me into comics, so I'm fond of this era. Maybe this was Wanda creating mutants. Maybe they've been hidden. Maybe her hex magic has made them not visible to the world. There was all this speculation going in. But that was fan theorizing. That happens. But then, middle of this series, we get Evan Peters' version of Quicksilver from the X-Men revealed. As Wanda is calling, I guess she was calling out to someone. The doorbell rings. One of the biggest moments in the history of the MCU, at least we thought so at that point. Opens the door. It is the superior Quicksilver from the Fox X-Men movies, and we start speculating, which that's on us. Are they going to bring in the Fox X-Men? Could that be possible here? Could we see Ian McKellen as Magneto? Could they do the Magneto as Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch's parents? Is this the door to the multiverse? Especially when the second Doctor Strange is called into the Multiverse of Madness, and she's rumored to be a big part in that movie. I believe even spotted on set in London where they're filming this movie. Now, if you weren't going that route, we're just going to bring in Quicksilver, why not get Aaron Taylor Johnston back? Aaron Taylor Johnson, I know he was just in Tenet, and he's a decent actor. I don't think he's as good as Evan Peters, but if we're going to bring up false hopes for her, thinking her brother's alive, I'm sure for the right price, probably cheaper than Evan Peters, Aaron Taylor Johnson would have reprised his role. A good role as Pietro, not as good as Evan Peters, but I think a good, solid performance in Age of Ultron. You never saw that coming. Love that. Or cast a completely new actor or an unknown as Quicksilver. But they knew as soon as the Evan Peters version showed up, that would get fans' hopes up. Fans who love the X-Men Fox movies. Now, some of which are bad, but some of which are very good. Days of Future Past, X-Men 2, Logan. 3 of the best superhero movies ever made. Now, there's some stinkers in there too, Dark Phoenix. But still, do not deny that they had some really good superhero movies within the Fox X-Men universe. On top of all that, not only do we get Evan Peters not being the Quicksilver from the Fox X-Men movies. That's one thing. But come to find out, in a very Iron Man-like 3, Trevor Slattery-like twist with the Mandarin, Evan Peters character here is not Pietro, it's not Quicksilver, it's not the brother of the Scarlet Witch, the son of Magneto, the master of magnetism. No. Evan Peters is brought in to play an aspiring actor. I guess he mainly did extras and stuff like that. At least that's what it seemed like. He wasn't like a big actor within this fictional universe, but an actor called Ralph Bohner. That's right, folks. Ralph Bohner. That's the story's fault. So not only did you tease the Quicksilver from the X-Men universe and tease the multiverse with this version of Evan Peters, but you undermined his whole character from the Fox X-Men movies. And worst of all, you did it with a boner joke. If DC did that with a character, the internet could not pile on enough shit to their plate. But with the Marvel, it's got the GA behind them, the general audience. Well, that was cool. How many podcasters have I heard this past week? Now, don't get me wrong. Some people called it out, like Joanna Robinson, Vanity Fair, for example. But I've heard many podcasters, who I'm not going to name names, have a bigger audience than me, that's for sure. So good for them. But I've heard many say, this was a great move. I'm glad it was that. They didn't need to do that. Okay. But you were just as excited when you saw him walk through that door at the end of that episode. And now you're okay with it, though. Okay. And to go along with this, kind of staying in the same, because I do kind of want to clear something up in my head and with you guys listening. During an interview for this show, Elizabeth Olsen, who plays Wanda, yes, she is the youngest Olsen sister. The Olsen twins, Michelle from Full House, their younger sister, and a superior actor to both of them. Although they just did kids stuff, so maybe that's not fair. But Elizabeth Olsen was asked after the big Mando cameo, again, spoilers for Mando Season 2, the next 10 seconds, that was Luke Skywalker, will there be a cameo that big here? And she said, absolutely. Now, maybe she misspoke. Maybe Evan Peters was that cameo. I'm fine with that. If Evan Peters is that cameo and they want us to think he's Quicksilver, I'm not blaming Elizabeth Olsen on that. But I am going to talk about Paul Bettany here. And this has nothing to do with the story or the script. This was him doing an interview. Paul Bettany teased that there was an A-list actor he always wanted to work with who was going to play a character not seen in the MCU yet. And Marvel fans were going to be pretty blown away by it. I think the number one spec on this one was, it's going to be Ian McKellen's Magneto. Paul Bettany is going to share a scene with one of the greatest actors alive, and it's going to be Magneto for the first time in the MCU. There was other speculation. There was Patrick Stewart as Professor X as well. But the big one we kept going back to was Magneto. Well, you know who that actor was? If you watch WandaVision, you may know. That actor, and this is kind of, I know he was joking around. I get it. But it's kind of narcissistic to say he's always wanted to work with the actor being himself. That's right, Paul Bettany. The actor he always wanted to work with was Paul Bettany, playing the White Vision, which is from the Vision Quest, John Byrne Avengers comic. Very cool. And I think that would have been a bigger moment when White Vision showed up had Paul Bettany have never opened his mouth on this. And he even went on it was either Good Morning America or the Today Show saying this. So it wasn't like he said it and a couple fan sites picked up on it. No, he was saying this to some of the most watched national press shows in the United States. Maybe, besides Ralph Bohner, this one upset me the most, but I'm more upset with Ralph Bohner because that was written into the context of the story. this whole thing, I promise, is not going to be crapping on WandaVision. I just got to get some stuff off my chest here. And I'm going to skip around a little bit here. In the post-credit scene, we see Wanda, after not facing any consequences, after taking a whole town hostage, after keeping people's children from them, we see Wanda put her hood on after transforming out of the awesome Scarlet Witch costume. I mean, they did an incredible job adapting that costume from the comics to a film version without it being like, oh, this is just the movie version of Scarlet Witch. No, this looked like this could be, in a couple years, the definitive Scarlet Witch costume. I will not be surprised if a lot of comic artists, when they draw Scarlet Witch, illustrate her moving forward, if they are inspired heavily by this costume. But after she has her big fight with Agatha Harkness, I'm not even going to go into how she defeated her. It was really cool. It was set up well in a previous episode. And Agatha was using something called the Dark Hole, which was a book that I think was missing from the library that the Ancient One had in Doctor Strange. There was a lot of speculation around that. That speculation happened to be right. But at the end of this show, she faces no repercussions despite torturing these people. And she goes off into the mountains. Many people speculate this is Wendigo Mountain, which is a place that the Scarlet Witch really took out the Avengers in the comics when she was being mind-controlled. Avengers 187, you can check that out. If you got the Marvel Comics, the app, read it. Good issue. But she, at the end of this thing, she has to let Vision go again. It's heartbreaking. He cries. The android, the synthezoid, as he's called in the comics, sheds a tear. Can a robot cry? Was a question asked in the comics by Vision many times. They answer it here. The third time she has to say goodbye. I mean, this character has really been put through tragedy. And after she has to say goodbye to her kids, who she debates telling what's going on, of course, these kids, I guess, will become Wiccan and Speed, Tommy and Billy, and they kind of already did here in this show. Cool homage to the Evan Peters Quicksilver, by the way, when Speed took out the troops, the sword troops who were coming in to take out Wanda, used his super speed and had the glasses and the hat of one of the troops on, much like when they go to get Magneto out in X-Men Days of Future Past. But what we see in the post-credits scene is after flying off and after Monica Rambeau, for some reason, telling Wanda, if I could bring my mom back, I would have done the same thing. Justifying, I guess that was the plot's way of justifying what she did. But look, she's in the wrong here. She is a villain at this point. She's the main character of this show, but she's almost, despite how much they want Hayward and Agatha to be the antagonist, she is almost simultaneously antagonist and protagonist by the end of this story. And in the post-credit scene, we see her drinking her tea in the mountain. She's gotten away. Her kids are gone. Vision's gone. You feel sorry for her. And then we see her astro projecting into another room in full Scarlet Witch costume. This is a badass scene, by the way. And she's going through the dark hole. She's teaching herself dark magic. And she hears her kids call out to her, I'm assuming from the multiverse. I think that will take us into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And that will be the plot of that movie, Doctor Strange, having to take Wanda down, because what she did to Westview, she's going to do to the entire multiverse, or at least this MCU version of the Marvel Universe. I think we'll see some multiverse stuff in the Spider-Man No Way Home, the Spider-Man 3 that's coming out. Rumors there we're not going to get into right now. Now, did she learn anything? Was there any real character growth if she feels guilty that she took these people's lives from them. And you can say, oh, their life sucked before. It was a rundown town. Okay. But, dude, she still made them into completely different people and hid their children away from them. Now, what you see here is it looks like this character's learned nothing. She's teaching herself dark magic. She fought dark magic in Agatha, and rather than learn the lessons from her, she's just going straight into it too selfishly. It appears to get her kids back, but I'm speculating maybe that's not the case. And there's no consequences for Wanda. Everybody's like, well, this is a fictional universe. There's not going to be consequences for superpowered beings. What? I seem to remember Loki being taken away in cuffs and a Hannibal Lecter mouthguard after Avengers. After having his ass whipped in the puny god moment. I seem to remember Thanos getting dusted after the genocide he committed of half the MCU universe. I remember consequences for villains in the MCU. Killmonger was killed by the Black Panther. What? There can be no consequences for these people who do bad in the MCU? Get out of here with that. Come on, man. Come on. Speaking of that, Hayward. Director Hayward's a jerk. I would never want to hang out with that guy. I would hate him to be my supervisor. But why was he arrested at the end? Wasn't he trying to save the residents of Westview? Was he simply arrested because he was a jerk? I know he pointed his gun at these kids, which looks really bad. I get that. And he's not a good person. But this family, at this point, was responsible for keeping these people against their will. Or at the very least, Wanda was. The kids were not responsible for that, but they were aiding and abetting her. Should he have pointed a gun at the kids? No. Was Sword doing the right thing here? I think that's debatable. It's an interesting conversation that we could have. But hey, I'm fine with that. Bad guys, Hayward, I guess. He gets his comeuppance here, whatever. Another thing, too. White Vision, what happens to him? He accesses all of Westview Vision's memories, and White Vision, I guess, is the original Vision rebuilt. So technically, the White Vision is more the OG Vision than the Westview version. And he just flies away. Flies away. Now, that's fine. That gives them a backdoor to bring back Vision down the line. I'm looking forward to that. I love Paul Bettany's performance. I like Vision as a character more than I do his performance. He's a good actor, but still. Now, Marvel fans have notoriously criticized DC for leaving back doors into their comic book stories to go back on continuity changes. I'll give you an example here. In 2011, DC rebooted everything with the New 52. And it was a big moment for comics. And there's some great stories that came out of that, Scott Snyder's Batman being the best of them. But before that, they had an event called Flashpoint that basically gave them a backdoor that if the New 52 didn't work, they could go back to the more established continuity, which they did, I think about 6 years later, maybe? Yeah, about 6 years later with DC Rebirth, which was another successful publishing initiative. Marvel fans gave DC so much crap. They gave themselves a backdoor. Commit. Okay. Are they committing here to this is the end of the We've watched this guy die twice in Infinity War. Once here. I say die, but when the hex is, changed back, when Westview's changed back. So in essence, he dies. And yet, it's our fourth time, and he's still around. That's fine, but don't tell me there's there are consequences in the MCU. Look at Iron Man. but don't make it out like these are Nolan level Batman film consequences. And hey, I get the end of the Dark Knight Rises criticism there too. Here's my favorite. Here's my favorite, listeners. And I'm not, look, I'm trying, especially in 2021, to be a positive person. And I had made these observations and put this down in the show notes. I was like, I really want to talk about this because I don't want people to think I'm crapping on them if they like WandaVision. I'm not. To each their own. But I'm still going to hold the show accountable. I still have the right to, as a fan, in my eyes, call out as shortcomings. The ship of Theseus moment. So there's this big debate between Vision and White Vision, or Westview Vision and Rebuilt Vision, whatever you want to call them, in the library, where they're speaking about this thing called the ship of Theseus. It's a ship in a museum, so if they replace parts of the ship in the museum, is it still the original ship? Is the essence of what's brought up here. And there's a little more to it than that. That's not my point here. And it made sense, like, to bring this up when we're debating if White Vision here gets these memories, is he Vision? And the answer is he is and isn't at the same time, because he may have the memories, but he doesn't have the emotions to go with those memories. And that's a big thing in the comic books too. But and this is more on internet culture, every person who talked about WandaVision this past week thought this was the most resonating, poignant moment in all of fiction. Oh, yes, the ship of Theseus. I'm an expert on that. I remember learning about that in school. Here's what the ship of Theseus is. And maybe I'm not even saying it right. I'm like, come on, man. I know I'm saying that a lot, but come on. On top of that, in the middle of the climax of this show, this huge fight's going on. They go into the library to have this conversation about the ship of Theseus. And it's a dialogue dump in the middle of action to explain kind of what the writers are thinking with this White Vision getting these memories. Kind of takes you out of the action, but go buy a bunch of books on the ship of Theseus on Amazon. Go write your dissertations on the ship of Theseus. And man, I can't wait for all the ship of Theseus YouTube channels and podcasts and explainer videos that are coming out. I cannot wait for that. WandaVision 2. The ship of Theseus. Whatever. Loved the Wanda origin story episode. One of the best things ever. I mentioned this earlier, but I just want to reiterate it because I know I'm kind of being negative here. I want to hit some positives. I love that they show us so much of what makes this character so tragic, and not just the stuff in Sokovia growing up, but a lot of the stuff done by Hydra and Von Strucker. And I don't believe he was featured in the show, but we get that cool shot where she sees the Scarlet Witch suit in her reflection when she's being experimented on with the stone from Loki's staff. So I thought that was a really cool moment. Kathryn Hahn made this show. She needs to be not only nominated for an Emmy, but she deserves this Emmy. I knew she was good comedically, but she chews scenery, but she's dramatic. She's hilarious at the same time. Agatha Harkness, this is a different take on the character, but it is a very strong take from Kathryn Hahn. Elizabeth Olsen, she dropped the accent for most of this show because she kind of had forgotten, I guess, supposedly about her Sokovian roots. And it's better off when she doesn't do this accent. This Eastern European accent that she, on her best days, goes in and out of. And she started doing it again at the end. And it's just like, just speak like Elizabeth Olsen. You have a beautiful voice. I know the comics have her being of, Eastern European descent, and this is a comic book fan saying that's one thing we can drop. It's not. I mean, you hear voices when you read comics as far as the character's voice when written well, but I don't think that's just something that Marvel fans would have a huge problem with. Now, I just want you guys to know, I love these characters. I do. Love, maybe I don't love Vision, but I love the Scarlet Witch because she in House of M was my entry points to one of the biggest loves of my life, superheroes and Marvel Comics. Now, back then that wasn't a cool thing. You were made fun of if you've read comics, and I'm glad so many more people, I would never want to be a gatekeeper to these characters. I'm glad so many more people, regardless of the medium, are enjoying these characters. I truly am. And I just kind of get upset, I'm not going to lie, when I feel like the character of Scarlet Witch has not been done justice. And I don't think that's the issue here. I think she has. I mean, I spoke about the outfit. I think besides going in and out of that accent, Elizabeth Olsen turns in a strong performance. You see the torture on her face. So I think I should just retract that earlier statement. I think they have done Scarlet Witch justice. The stories around her, however, they have not. I pray that this isn't their version of House of M because it doesn't hold a candle to that story, which brought me in the comics. I think this was, in many ways, Kevin Feige and Marvel's one last chance to take a shit on the Fox X-Men before they do their version. And they succeeded in that. They really did. And I'm sure their version will be better because it's the MCU, and the MCU never fails. Betting against the MCU and entertainment's like betting against whatever team Tom Brady's playing for in the Super Bowl or the NFL playoffs. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm not saying they can't fail, but they probably won't. And I can't wait to see what they do with the X-Men. And it will be worth the wait, I feel like. But at the same time, don't act like you're going to give it to us and take it away. That's frustrating. Also, don't be mad at comic books fans, fanboys, fangirls. I'll wear that with a badge of pride. It's not a detriment to me to be called that. For not enjoying a show, don't be mad, Twitter. Don't be mad, YouTubers, podcasters, people who run things at Disney, at comic book fans for not enjoying the show as much as general audiences. Especially when you sit up red herrings just to throw off comics fans. Last example I'll give of that. We all speculated about characters like Nightmare, Mephisto. Look, I've read a ton of Marvel comics. I've seen Nightmare one time. I could not tell you anything about him. I mean, I could Google something and tell you about. But Mephisto's a pretty big character. I mean, he's like Thanos level baddie, introduced in Silver Surfer. And, man, he's the Satan for MCU. I mean, sorry, Satan for Marvel Comics. And I'm assuming when he's in the MCU, he will be as well. I will say this. The Rain Hell Demon Spawn moment from Pietro. Cringe saying that. Fake Pietro. From Ralph Boner. That was a troll. It did seem like the kids were part. And maybe that's what we'll see in Doctor Strange and Into the Multiverse of Madness. Maybe that is what we will see. That wraps it up for my thoughts on WandaVision. If I was rating it on the confirmed Epic podcast rating, I would give it a good 3 out of 5. I'd give it a good and a half. That half coming for that Scarlet Witch origin. Now that one episode next to last was confirmed Epic that has that origin. That being said, I'm going to be there. when movie theaters open up to see all these MCU movies. I can't wait to see. I didn't love the first Doctor Strange. I loved him in Infinity War. I love him as a character in the comics. I think that's the movie I'm looking forward to the most, even more than the Spider-Man No Way Home, even with the rumors of who might be in that movie. So that's just about going to do it for the 111th edition of the Confirmed Epic podcast and our thoughts on WandaVision, the Disney Plus series that took the internet, fan culture, MCU, general audiences, critics, fanboys, fangirls by storm. And I am so thankful if you click play and made it this far through and listen to my thoughts on it. I'm sorry if I came across negative. I try not to do that, but at the same time, I'm going to be my authentic self for listeners. Find me on Tumblr, TheRealBrad, REEL Brad /Tumblr.com. That's TUMBLR.com. Twitter at TheRealBradBell, DREEL Brad Bell. The Epic Review, thepicreview.com. Also, of course, the home of this podcast, as far as the number one place to find it, our YouTube channel. Just search Confirmed Epic Podcast. Make sure you subscribe. Like the video. If you don't like it, fine. Give me a thumbs down. That's on you. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, just like I am on this podcast. Leave a comment. Subscribe. We hit over 100 subscribers. A lot of you guys have been listening. Thank you so much. And from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, or maybe I should say from Wendigo Mountain, chaos, magic, and all, we are out.
That's all I have to say about that.